welcome to day 6 of Spooky 7, which is the Halloween series that I started on this channel. And that is super exciting because that means that tomorrow is Halloween. So far in this case, we have done somebody trying to bring somebody else back from the dead. We've done witchcraft, we've done a haunting, we've done aliens, and we did a missing persons case. And that leaves us with vampires. Now, these are not Twilight type of vampires. These are people that genuinely believe that they were vampires. So this video is going to be a little bit more gruesome and gory than the usual videos that I do on this channel. So I just want to give you a fair warning that if that isn't your thing, you might want to click out of this video and go check out one of the other 5 videos that I uploaded this week, or any other video on my channel that isn't as gruesome as this one. But with that warning out of the way, let's get right into today's video. Rod Ferrell was born on March 28th, 1980. He was said to have a very difficult childhood, and after his parents split up, he moved between Florida and Kentucky quite often, meaning that he changed schools a lot. He was also sexually abused by a family member, and his mother was actually charged with attempted rape after it came out that she had been writing letters to Rod's 14-year-old friend trying to convince him to have sex with her. Rod was also really into the occult at a young age and started to perform satanic rituals, and even went as far as to carve an upside-down cross into his chest. When Rod was a teenager, him and his mother moved to Murray, Kentucky, which, although is a very religious town, also had a very large vampire community. Although these vampires in this community were completely harmless despite appearing a little bit odd to your average person. Rod started to become absolutely obsessed with vampires after playing the game The Vampire: The Masquerade, which I believe is like a role-playing game. After this obsession started to grow, Rod started to really believe and tell other people that he was a 500-year-old vampire named Versago. Eventually, Rod joined a vampire cult of his own, and this vampire cult was known as the Vampire Clan, and they partook in dark and twisted rituals. The exact numbers of members involved in this cult is completely unknown. Dana Cooper, who was 19 years old, was actually the leader of this cult, but after Rod joined, he seemed to have a very powerful hand above the other members, and he was more controlling and demanding than Dana. On one occurrence, this cult has actually broken into an animal shelter in Murray, and they stole a bunch of puppies, and these puppies were later found in a field behind the animal shelter. They all had their limbs ripped off while they were still alive, and they were stomped so aggressively into the ground that they were actually in the ground. But they were done all of this too while they were still alive, until they had died from being in so much pain. The group would meet in an abandoned house that they called the Vampire's Hotel, and here they would cut each other and drink each other's blood and torture each other for sexual pleasure as well as partake in orgies. Because Rod had moved from Florida to Kentucky so often, he obviously still had friends in Florida, and one of these friends that he kept in contact with this whole time was a girl named Heather Wendorf. Now, Heather was described by people to be very sweet and normal until she started to hang out with Rod, at which point she started to dress very gothic and dark and started telling people that she had crossed over and was now a vampire. On November 26, 1996, Dana Cooper, Rob Farrell, and other cult members, Charity Kessie, as well as Scott Anderson, would travel from Kentucky to Florida to rescue Heather Wendorf from what they described as an abusive home life. I'm not 100% positive how all of these occurrences actually happened, but after arriving at the Wendorf home, all of the girls, being Dana, Heather, and Charity, left to go to Heather's boyfriend's apartment so that she could say goodbye to him before running away. And the boys, being Scott and Rod Farrell, stayed at the Wendorf home while the girls went to do this. The cult claims that murder was never what they intended for that night, but with a bad mix of drugs, that is exactly what happened. Richard Wendorf was asleep on his couch when Rod and Scott had entered his home. Now, on the way to entering the home, the boys actually stopped into the garage and got a crowbar. And once they got inside, Rod brutally beat Richard Wendorf while he was asleep on his couch, really fracturing his skull and his ribs and eventually killing him. Naomi Ruth Queen found her husband brutally murdered on the couch, and shortly after this, just moments later after she found her husband, Rod brutally bludgeoned her to death with the same crowbar that he had used to murder her husband. Rod said that he had never intended on killing Ruth, but after she threw a glass of boiling hot water at him, this really enraged him, and that led to her murder. The couple's body was discovered the next day by their daughter Jennifer, and all 5 cult members are now serving time in prison. Now we're going to go back quite a few years into Stockholm, Sweden in the year of 1932. Lily Lindstrom was making money working as a sex worker, and she was living in the Atlas area in an apartment at the time and was actually referred to as the call girl because she was the only prostitute in that area who had a phone. May 1st, 1932, Lily was hanging out with her other fellow prostitute whose name was Minnie, and she actually lived in the apartment just below Lily. And they were both just, hanging out and planning their events for that evening when Lily's phone rang. And Minnie answered the phone, and whoever had called had actually requested to speak to Lily specifically. This person was a client and requested Lily's services that evening, and she confirmed that she would be available and that this person could meet her at her apartment. 4 days had now passed and Minnie hadn't seen Lily anywhere, and she kept going up to Lily's apartment just to, knock on the door and make sure her friend was okay, but she never got an answer. So on May 4th, 1932, Minnie went to the police and told them how she believed that her friend Lily was missing. Shortly after Minnie had reported Lily missing to police, the police arrived at Lily's apartment to do a welfare check, and that is when they found a horrific scene. Lily's lifeless body was laying face down in her bed. She was completely nude and she had severe blunt force trauma to her skull. At the scene, they had discovered a used condom which was stuffed into Lily's butt, which suggested that sexual activity took place before the murder had happened. They also found that Lily was covered in saliva and her body had been almost completely drained of all of its blood. At the scene, they had also found a ladle which they believed was used by the killer to drink Lily's blood. Sadly, in 1932, they didn't have the technology that we have today to, test DNA, so all of this evidence put together didn't lead investigators anywhere. They couldn't test the saliva, they couldn't test any of the DNA that was found in the condom, they couldn't test anything. So although this case would have likely been solved very quickly today, this remains a cold case. 9 of Lily's clients were interviewed by police, but none of these interviews led anywhere and none of these people were solid suspects. And besides the DNA that was left all over Lily and the room, nothing was found that could lead police to the murderer, and the scene was actually described as being really, really clean. And because of this, people back then believed that maybe the murderer was a member of law enforcement. Besides that, there isn't too much to go on in this case, although people do believe that Lily was murdered out of a sexual fantasy, and due to the fact that the condom was found in her butt, it is likely that the person was having sex with Lily from behind and punched her in the head due to the myth that if you do this while having sex, the male will have an enhanced orgasm. Daniel and Manuela actually met after Daniel had posted an ad in a magazine looking for love, and his ad was pretty odd and it screams that something's wrong to me, so I just want to get it exact for you guys, so I'm just going to be looking down here for 1 second while I read it off my computer. But his ad read, "Black-haired vampire seeks princess of darkness who despises everything and everyone and has a bidden farewell to life." So take from that what you will. But with that all being said, let's get on with the rest of the case. So probably after hearing that quote, you can already tell that there was only one way to describe this couple, and that is that they were a match made in absolute hell. Manuela and Daniel both had been diagnosed with mental health issues at a young age, and by the time that they had met, they already both believed that they were vampires and partook in satanic rituals. Shortly after the couple met, they started to spend all of their time together and quickly moved in with one another. And they took this vampire thing so seriously that both of them slept inside a coffin, they never went out during the day, and their home looked exactly like what you would picture a vampire's house to look like from a movie. The couple got married on June 6, 2001, and the significance with this for them is because it was the 6th day of the 6th month, which, 666, the number of the devil, so they thought that this had some kind of significance. And exactly 1 month after getting married, on July 6, 2001, the couple would murder their friend Frank Hackett. The couple had told Frank that they were having a party, but little did he know that he was the only guest that they invited. And once he arrived at the home, Daniel smashed his head in multiple times until he passed out and then stabbed him a total of 66 times. The couple had cut Frank's veins and drained his blood into small bowls, which they then drank. They sacrificed Frank to Satan, and when he was found, there was actually writing above his body that said, "Where Satan lives." And when Frank was found by investigators, he actually had a pentagram carved into his chest. After murdering Frank, the couple went and bought a chainsaw and planned on going on a massacre, and they actually had a kill list planned of all of the people that they wanted to be their future victims. But luckily, investigators did their work really fast and caught them before any of this could happen. Once caught, the couple had actually told police that they were told by Satan to murder their friend, and Manuela actually said that while the murder was taking place, Daniel's eyes as well as the knife he was using to stab Frank were glowing yellow, and that she could feel the devil's presence in the room. During the trial, Manuela actually requested that all of the windows in the courtroom be blacked out, but this was denied, although she was allowed to wear sunglasses in the courtroom due to sun sensitivity, seeing as she hadn't been out in the sun in many years. During the trial, neither Manuela or Daniel showed any remorse for what they had done, and they were really disrespectful throughout the trial, and both of them pled not guilty as they claimed that the devil was controlling them while they murdered Frank. Neither of them were served with life sentences as they were both deemed extremely mentally ill, but Manuela is actually out of prison now, although she has zero contact with Daniel. Richard Chase is also known as the Dracula Killer, the Vampire Killer of Sacramento, and just plain old the Vampire Killer. Richard Chase was said to have a very tough childhood as he was abused by both of his parents and started abusing animals and killing them and committing arson at a very young age, which we all now know is a sign of a serial killer. In his teenage years, Richard began to really abuse drugs and alcohol, and in his adult life he became like a pathological liar and started to tell people that somebody had actually stolen his organs, which of course was not true. Once Richard had actually moved out on his own, he started to kill various types of animals. They varied in sizes and cats, dogs, rats, all of the above. And he would actually eat them raw. And if he didn't eat them raw, he would put them in a blender with Coca-Cola and then drink the mixture. And he said that he did this because he believed that it prevented his heart from shrinking, whatever that means. In 1976, Richard Chase was actually put in the hospital after being caught trying to inject rabbit's blood into himself. And while in the hospital, the nurses had nicknamed him Dracula because of his obsession with blood. During his stay at the hospital, Richard had actually caught 2 birds through a window and drank both of their bloods, and on one occasion extracted blood from a therapy dog using a syringe that he had stolen from one of the nurses. While he was staying at the hospital, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and underwent treatment the whole time that he was there. But in 1976, he was deemed fit to leave the hospital and was released into his mother's care. While staying with his mother for whatever reason, I'm really not sure why she did this, but she started to wean him off his medication, which kept him stable. And after she did this, once he was completely off all of his meds, she allowed him again to move out on his own. On December 29th, 1977, Richard would kill his first human victim. And this would be the start of a killing spree that lasted 1 year, and he had a total of 6 victims. After Richard Chase had been caught by police, they went to investigate his apartment. And there they found a horrific scene. In the kitchen, everything was covered in blood, and it looked as if his drinking and eating utensils had actually been dipped in human blood before he would use them. Now, just a creepy fact that I want to throw in here about Richard Chase is that he actually would not go into homes where the door was locked. If the door was locked, he took this as a sign that he was not welcome there, but if the door was unlocked, he took this as a sign that he was welcome. Richard Chase committed suicide on December 26, 1980, and his cause of death was actually due to an overdose. Now, after doing a little bit of research, I actually found that drinking large amounts of human blood can actually result in death. So if you drink like so much amounts of human blood, you'll die. And none of these people died except for Richard Chase, who committed suicide. So that leaves me with the question, how did they do it? And are they actually vampires? Just something to think about here. But guys, that brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any more videos from me. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the last video in this series, because tomorrow is Halloween, which is super exciting. But thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!